There are places that seem untouched by urgency, places where nothing appears to be rushing toward the next moment. The evening settles slowly across the water. The distant islands rest beneath the fading light. The hills rise quietly from the shoreline, as if they have been waiting here forever. Nothing moves quickly. Nothing demands attention. Everything simply remains. The sky glows softly above the horizon. Warm colors spread across the clouds before slowly fading into deeper shades. The sea reflects the final light of the day. Gentle movements ripple across the surface. Each wave arrives without announcement. Each wave leaves without regret. The water never seems concerned about where it is going. It moves because movement belongs to it. Nothing more is required. The mind often forgets this. It searches for reasons. It searches for outcomes. It searches for explanations that will finally make everything feel complete. Yet standing before a landscape like this, those habits begin to loosen. The distant horizon offers no answers. The islands reveal no hidden meaning. The evening makes no promises. And somehow that feels peaceful. The mind spends so much time reaching beyond the present moment, toward tomorrow, toward certainty, toward the next thing that might finally bring rest. But here the next thing never seems to arrive. Only the water remains. Only the fading light remains. Only the silence between distant waves remains. The day slowly releases itself into evening. The sunlight softens along the edges of the hills. The shadows grow longer. Nothing resists the change. Nothing tries to remain exactly as it was. The sky does not hold on to daylight. The sea does not hold on to reflection. Everything allows itself to transform. Everything allows itself to continue. Perhaps peace begins in the same way. Not by holding, not by preserving, but by allowing. Allowing thoughts to arrive. Allowing thoughts to leave. Allowing moments to appear and disappear naturally. The water understands this effortlessly. A wave rises. A wave falls. The sea remains whole. Nothing is lost. The mind often treats thoughts differently. A concern appears. A memory appears. An unfinished conversation returns, and immediately attention begins to follow. The thought feels important, necessary, urgent. Yet most thoughts fade exactly as waves fade. They rise, they linger briefly. Then they disappear into something larger than themselves. The evening continues deepening. The colors become softer. The distant islands slowly darken against the glowing horizon. Everything feels quieter now, not because the world has become silent, because nothing is demanding to be noticed. The sea does not ask for attention. The hills do not ask for attention. The sky does not ask for attention. They simply exist, and perhaps existence itself is enough. Breathing becomes easier. The body settles naturally. The shoulders release tension that may have gone unnoticed. There is nowhere to go, nothing to solve, nothing to accomplish within this moment. Only this view, only this evening, only this gentle rhythm of light and water. The mind begins to slow, not through effort, not through discipline, simply because there is less reason to hurry. The horizon stretches endlessly beyond the sea, yet it does not feel distant. It feels open, spacious, welcoming, as though the landscape is quietly reminding you that life does not always need direction. Sometimes it only needs attention. The sea continues moving beneath the fading sky. The hills remain steady. The islands rest quietly beyond the water. Everything belongs exactly where it is. Nothing appears unfinished. Nothing appears missing. The evening asks for nothing more than presence, And slowly, almost without noticing, the mind begins to offer the same. A thought arrives, then leaves. Another follows, then fades. The space between them becomes easier to notice. The openness surrounding them becomes easier to notice, like the sky above the sea, like the horizon beyond the islands, wide, unhurried, unconcerned. The landscape reveals something simple, not a lesson, not an answer, only an observation, that perhaps peace has never depended on reaching somewhere else. Perhaps it has never depended on understanding everything. Perhaps it has always been available within moments like this. Moments where nothing is being chased, nothing is being resisted, nothing is being held too tightly. The final light lingers above the water. The sea reflects its fading warmth. The evening settles further across the land, and for a little while, everything seems content to remain exactly as it is, including you. As the evening continues, the landscape begins to reveal a different kind of quiet. Not the quiet that comes from silence, not the quiet that comes from the absence of sound. A deeper quiet, one that exists beneath movement, beneath thought, beneath the endless habit of searching for what comes next. The sea continues its slow rhythm beneath the fading sky. Small waves travel across the surface before disappearing into the larger body of water. Nothing seems permanent. Nothing seems fixed. Yet nothing feels unstable. The water changes constantly. The sea remains. The same may be true of experience. Thoughts arrive. Feelings arrive. Memories arrive, each one appearing for a moment before changing into something else. Yet something remains beneath them all, something steady, something that does not depend on what happens next. The distant islands rest quietly against the horizon. Their shapes darken as the sunlight continues to fade. They do not appear concerned with the passing hours. They do not appear concerned with tomorrow. They simply remain where they are. The mind often struggles with this simplicity. It wants movement. It wants progress. It wants certainty. It wants to know where everything is leading. But the landscape offers no explanation. The sea does not explain itself. The hills do not explain themselves. The sky does not explain itself. Everything exists without needing a reason. And somehow, that feels liberating. Attention rests gently upon the water. The reflection of the sky shifts with every ripple. No image lasts, no pattern remains. The surface changes continuously. Yet the beauty of the scene is never diminished. Nothing needs to stay the same in order to be complete. The evening understands this. The sea understands this. Nature seems to understand what the mind often forgets. That change is not a problem to solve. It is simply part of being here. A thought appears, perhaps something unfinished, perhaps something waiting beyond this moment. For a brief second, attention follows. The familiar urge returns. The urge to continue the story. The urge to solve the question. The urge to arrive somewhere else. But then the horizon appears again, wide, open, unconcerned. The sea continues moving exactly as before. The islands remain exactly where they are. Nothing in the landscape seems troubled by uncertainty. Nothing appears incomplete because tomorrow has not yet arrived. The thought begins to lose its urgency. It fades naturally, not because it has been answered, because it no longer feels necessary. Breathing remains soft. The body feels lighter. The tension of needing to understand begins to loosen. Not completely, not forever, Just enough. Enough to rest here. Enough to notice what has always been present. The final warmth of the sky lingers above the horizon. Orange becomes gold. Gold becomes blue. Blue slowly deepens into evening. The transition happens without effort. No part of the sky resists becoming something new. No part of the day refuses to end. Everything allows itself to change. Everything allows itself to continue. The sea reflects this perfectly. Every wave appears and disappears. Every reflection comes and goes. Yet the larger stillness remains untouched. Perhaps peace is not found within the absence of movement. Perhaps it is found within the willingness to let movement happen. The landscape seems to whisper this quietly, not through words, not through instruction, only through its presence. The islands remain, the sea remains, the sky remains, everything changing, everything staying, both at once. The mind begins to soften further. There is less need to divide experience into categories: good, bad, success, failure, progress, delay. The evening seems uninterested in such distinctions. The sea welcomes every wave. The sky welcomes every color. The horizon welcomes every passing moment. Nothing is excluded. Nothing is rejected. Everything belongs. The openness of the view becomes easier to feel, not just to see, to feel the vastness beyond the islands, the endless sky above the water, the spaciousness surrounding every thought. There is room for everything here, room for uncertainty, room for memory, room for silence, room for change. Nothing needs to be pushed away. Nothing needs to be held tightly. The sea continues its quiet rhythm. The sky continues darkening. The evening settles gently across the landscape, and somewhere within that stillness, another recognition begins to emerge. Not an answer, not a conclusion, only a feeling. A sense that perhaps life does not need to be controlled as much as we imagine. Perhaps it is already unfolding, just as the sea unfolds, just as the evening unfolds, just as the light quietly disappears beyond the horizon, without effort, without resistance, exactly as it is meant to. As darkness slowly approaches, the landscape becomes even simpler. The bright colors of the day begin to fade. The details of the hills soften. The distant islands become quiet silhouettes resting upon the water. The sea continues moving beneath the last traces of light. Nothing dramatic happens. Nothing announces the arrival of evening. The world simply becomes quieter. And in that quietness, something else becomes easier to notice. The space that has always been here. The openness that exists beneath every experience. The sky seems larger now, not because it has grown, because there is less competing for attention. The fading light removes distraction. The darkening landscape removes detail. What remains feels vast. The sea reflects this feeling. The surface continues moving. Yet the movement seems gentler now, slower, softer, as though even the water is settling into stillness. Thought continues to appear. A memory returns unexpectedly. A moment from years ago. A conversation. A place. A face. For a brief second, it feels important. For a brief second, attention follows. But then the memory begins to drift away, like a wave dissolving into the larger sea. Nothing needs to be done with it. Nothing needs to be solved. It came. Now it goes. The sea offers this lesson endlessly. Every wave appears. Every wave disappears. The water remains. Perhaps the same is true for thoughts. Perhaps they were never meant to stay. The horizon now seems almost invisible. The line separating sea and sky becomes harder to find. The distinction remains, yet it feels less significant. The water belongs to the sky belongs to the water. Everything appears connected by the same fading light. The mind begins to feel this too. The sense of separation softens. The need to stand apart softens. The feeling of carrying everything alone softens. The landscape does not exist in isolation. The sea depends on the sky. The islands depend on the sea. The evening depends on the day that came before it. Everything belongs to everything else. The body remains relaxed. Breathing remains easy. The rhythm of the sea and the rhythm of breathing seem strangely similar. Both continuous, both effortless, both happening without instruction. There is comfort in this realization. So much of life unfolds on its own. The heart beats, the breath moves, the sky changes, the sea rises and falls. Much of what matters most already knows how to happen. The mind spends years trying to control what cannot be controlled, trying to guarantee outcomes, trying to prevent uncertainty, trying to secure a future that never fully arrives. Yet the landscape seems unconcerned by uncertainty. The sea does not know the shape of every future wave. The sky does not know the exact path of every cloud. Still, everything continues. Still, everything belongs. The final colors begin fading from the horizon. The warmth of the evening becomes cooler. The sea darkens gently. The islands settle deeper into shadow. Nothing feels lost. Nothing feels taken away. The beauty remains. Only its form changes. The same may be true for many things. Relationships change. Circumstances change. Memories change. Even the way we see ourselves changes. Yet something deeper remains beneath all of it. A quiet awareness, a simple presence, a stillness that survives every transformation. The sea reveals this without speaking. The evening reveals this without effort. The horizon reveals this simply by remaining. Attention widens once again. The landscape feels larger now, not because the view has expanded, because the mind has stopped narrowing itself around individual concerns. There is room for everything. Room for uncertainty, room for change, room for unfinished stories. Nothing needs to be resolved tonight. Nothing needs to be completed before rest arrives. The sea does not finish itself before becoming calm. The sky does not finish itself before becoming dark. Everything is already enough, exactly as it is. The waves continue moving across the water. The darkness continues approaching. The islands continue resting beyond the shoreline. Everything remains simple. Everything remains unhurried. And somewhere within that simplicity, another quiet recognition begins to appear. Not a solution, not an achievement, only a feeling. A sense that perhaps peace does not come from finally controlling life. Perhaps it comes from trusting it, trusting the movement, trusting the uncertainty, trusting the unfolding. The sea continues. The sky continues. The evening continues. And for a little while longer, nothing asks to be different than it already is. Eventually, the last traces of daylight begin to disappear. The glow that once stretched across the horizon becomes softer. The colors that filled the sky fade into quieter shades. The sea darkens beneath the evening. The islands become silhouettes against the remaining light. Nothing resists this transition. Nothing asks the day to stay a little longer. The landscape accepts the arrival of night completely. Watching this, the mind begins to understand something it often forgets. Not every ending is a loss. Not every change removes something valuable. Sometimes change simply reveals another form of beauty. The sea remains beneath the fading light. The horizon remains beyond the water. The islands remain where they have always been. Only the appearance changes. The essence stays the same. Thoughts continue drifting through awareness. A memory appears, then another. A plan for tomorrow. A question without an answer. A small concern waiting somewhere beyond this evening. Yet none of them feel as urgent as they once did. The landscape has been quietly teaching something all along, not through instruction, not through advice, only through example. The sea does not hold on to its waves. The sky does not hold on to its colors. The evening does not hold on to the day. Everything arrives, everything leaves, everything belongs. The body feels settled now. The breath moves naturally. There is no need to force stillness, no need to create peace. The peace was already here, hidden beneath the constant movement of thought, hidden beneath the habit of searching, hidden beneath the belief that something more was needed. The water continues moving gently through the darkness. The sound of distant waves remains. The horizon becomes harder to see, yet somehow it feels closer than before. Not because the distance has changed, because the need to reach it has disappeared. The horizon no longer represents somewhere else. It no longer suggests a destination waiting in the distance. It simply exists. Part of the sea, part of the sky, part of this moment. The mind often spends years moving toward imaginary horizons, future versions of itself, future achievements, future answers, future peace, always believing that fulfillment waits a little farther ahead. Yet standing before the sea, that belief begins to soften. Nothing beyond the horizon appears necessary. Nothing beyond this evening appears necessary. The moment itself becomes enough. The sea becomes enough. The fading light becomes enough. Even uncertainty becomes enough. The islands remain quiet in the distance. The darkness continues spreading across the water. The sky opens wider as the final colors disappear. Everything becomes simpler, not smaller, not less meaningful, simply simpler. There is water, there is sky, there is breath, there is awareness. Nothing else is required. The usual need to define everything begins to fade. The need to judge, the need to compare, the need to decide whether this moment is important. The landscape seems uninterested in such questions. The sea does not measure its value. The sky does not evaluate itself. The evening does not wonder whether it is enough. Everything simply exists. And in that existence, there is a quiet completeness. Attention widens further. The sea, the islands, the sky, the fading horizon, the thoughts that come and go, all appearing within the same open awareness, all equally welcome. Nothing needs to be pushed away. Nothing needs to be held tightly. Everything can simply be allowed. The night continues arriving. The water reflects the final remnants of light. The world feels calm, not because every question has been answered, not because every problem has disappeared, because for a brief moment, there is no need to solve anything. There is only presence, only this experience, only this quiet unfolding. The sea continues, the sky continues, life continues, everything moving according to its own rhythm, everything belonging to something larger than itself. The final light finally slips beyond the horizon. Darkness settles gently across the water. The islands become shadows within the distance. The evening completes its transformation. And yet nothing truly ends. The sea remains. The sky remains. The stillness remains. The awareness that has been quietly present throughout the entire evening remains. It was here at the beginning. It is here now. It asks for nothing. It requires nothing. It simply exists. And perhaps that is the final recognition. Not an answer. Not a conclusion. Only a gentle understanding that peace may never have been waiting somewhere else. Not beyond the horizon, not beyond tomorrow, not beyond some future version of life. Perhaps it has always been here, within the waves, within the fading light, within the quiet space between thoughts.